Sorry, my camera is resting on a notepad and papers, so it's probably very shaky throughout the video, so I apologize. Hi, my name is Carter Walker. I love talking about movies, music, games, and comics, and I recently just watched Creed 3, and the last week, 2 weeks, I had just watched every single Rocky movie and Creed movie, just because I wanted to be caught up on the franchise, and also I was like, you know what, why not rank them and review them? So right now, I'm going to go ahead and rank all of the Rocky movies, all of the Creed movies, and review every single one of them. Full disclosure, I have seen the Creed movies more than once, quite a few times actually, but when it comes to the Rocky movies, I've seen bits and pieces of them, but never seen a full Rocky movie until about a few weeks ago. So I was really excited to go ahead and check them all out. I really enjoyed this franchise, and I can definitely see why Rocky won an Oscar back in '76, and why it's one of the most celebrated and inspirational movies of all time. And I have some interesting thoughts on the franchise that I think a lot of people will dislike, especially when it comes to a few of the more iconic movies. But overall, I think it's a very good franchise. I really enjoyed it, especially the characters of Rocky Balboa, of Adrian, Apollo Creed, and Adonis Creed. I think that Rocky himself is always written very well, except maybe a few times here and there. Stallone definitely knows what he's doing. It's all, made very competently, made very well. And I think overall, as a franchise, I can enjoy every single movie. I can watch every single movie, which I cannot say for quite a few franchises. I think the last franchise that I really sat down and kind of watched was Scream. That doesn't count. That's again, just like Rocky, a great franchise. The Halloween franchise, however, wow, some of those are really rough. Very, very rough to get through, especially when it gets into the later films like 5, 6, Resurrection, Rob Zombies. Yikes, those are difficult to watch. However, with the Rocky movies, I actually, like I said, enjoyed all of them. So let's get right into it. Starting out with number 9, bottom of the pile, is of course Rocky 5. I really don't think anyone else would rank any other Rocky or Creed movie below this one. It's kind of quite obviously the worst one. Is it a terrible movie? Is it absolute dog water? No, it's not a terrible movie by any means. Just compared to other movies like Rocky Balboa, the highs of this franchise, it's very, very low. It takes Rocky into a place where it's kind of just miserable. I really don't enjoy seeing Rocky struggle like crazy. I really don't enjoy also seeing Paulie just sign away all of Rocky's life right after he's got permanent brain damage. So he just loses everything within the first 15 minutes. I see what they're doing with that and trying to take Rocky back to his roots, back to being, a normal guy. But I just don't think that it works as well as they wanted it to. I can respect it, going away from the 80s Flash, kind of ushering Rocky into a new era where he's, more respected, more of a... Sorry, I just adjusted my camera. Ushering Rocky into a new era, maybe having him take a back seat and train a fighter. However, I just don't think it works. I think Tommy Gunn is a terrible character. George Washington Duke is somehow an even worse character. And I was hoping the entire movie that Rocky or Tommy would beat George Washington Duke into a coma, or maybe the ghost of Apollo Creed would come out and murder him, because he was bothering me so bad. Every line he says is just so outlandish, and I get it. It's the era of promoter boxing where managers are really important. You have to get yourself out there, and it's important to have a name and a gimmick. But I just don't think it works as well as Stallone wants it to, or as the director wants it to. There's a lot of contradicting styles. Stallone writes the movie to be very serious, very down to earth, and Rocky's struggling. And then the directing style is just all over the place, whimsical, and it's intense zooms on Mickey's face as he's telling Rocky in the spirit world to stand up and knock him down, because Mickey loves you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awful. And I don't think the street fight works. It's goofy. The whole tone of the movie is just all over the place, but there's still a lot of great moments, like when Rocky confronts Tommy after he beats up Paulie. He's like, you knocked him down, now you try knocking me down. I'm like, Rocky, I love you, you beautiful speech impediment man. It's like there's a lot of great in here. There's a lot of good ideas in this movie, but the execution is all over the place, very poor, and so I think it comes out to be, just a below average movie in general, and a very big disappointment in the Rocky franchise. Like I said, still got great moments, but when compared to those highs of every other single movie, it doesn't come close. Coming in at number 8, another controversial pick, from what I can tell, is Rocky 2. I am not a fan of this movie. To me, it's the first Rocky, but just worse. It's putting Rocky and Adrian in a position where it's just embarrassing, humiliating for them. You get to see them like spend away all their money, and then Rocky can't read. He tries to do commercials, and Rocky is just more like, I feel like he's more bitter in this movie for some reason. It just doesn't feel like the same Rocky that we know and love from Rocky 2. And although him and Adrian's relationship blossoms, and I love everything between them with that, it sidelines her for a good portion of the movie, and then Rocky is just like super depressed with everything. And I don't think that this movie handles the drama or anything else as well as the first one or movies after it handle. I think Apollo Creed is just like so over the top as a villain that it's exhausting. It's just so weird, and he's like, we gotta slander him, you gotta do this and do that, and it just ends up, and seeing where the franchise goes with Apollo and where he was in the first one, it just comes off weird. However, I think that this movie is a lot better than Rocky 5, and I genuinely enjoy this movie. I would still rate it like a solid 3 stars, 3.5. Just because that last act where, Adrian wakes up from her coma and Rocky starts training again and goes and fights Creed and wins, really freaking good. It has probably one of, if not the best final fight in the entire series. And I love how Rocky wins the championship and he's back on. However, there's a lot of things that kind of bother me, like Rocky's motivation for getting back into the ring just isn't as good. When he wins the championship, still very rewarding, still endearing. However, it's not as effective as it would have been because his motivation for getting back into the ring isn't as good, and it focuses a lot on his motivation and his drive to get back into the ring. And I think that a lot of things in this movie don't really work as well as Stallone would like them to. However, he's a great writer, director, and actor as Rocky. I just take a lot of issues with the first, 2/3 of this movie. Coming in at number 7, the one that will probably get me crucified by Rocky fans, movie fans, 80s fans, is Rocky 4. I feel bad. I wanted to like this movie. It's definitely just something that I was looking forward to watching. I've seen clips of it that I was like, oh, that's fun, that's cheesy, that's fun. And then I watched the whole movie, and there was a lot of things in it that bothered me. And I know it's very much a product of its time, very much people call it propaganda because of the Cold War, and I can definitely see that. It's a product of its time, very cheesy. It's a big tonal departure from Rocky 3, 5, 1 and 2. It's a tonal departure from the whole franchise. Go from Rocky 1, where he's a kid from the streets of Philadelphia, trying to work under a mob boss, work his way up, trying to go the distance, to him fighting Ivan Drago for propaganda reasons. It just doesn't work for me. However, it's not a bad movie. I would definitely love to watch it again, and I hope to watch it again, and I understand where the love comes from. Do I think it's overrated by Rocky fans and by movie fans? Yes, but that's just my opinion. I wasn't born back in that era. I wasn't alive, and hearing people talk about it, reading stories of people dude, it was crazy. We were all in the theater cheering for Rocky, USA, just living through the Cold War and watching, Rocky beat the Russians. And I get it. There's a lot of things to like in this movie. I don't like how Rocky and Adrian are separate for a lot of this movie. There is a good Rocky Adrian scene. I think there's 1 or 2. I don't like Apollo dying. I think that, it's not handled very well. This whole movie is this goofy cheeseball fest, and oh my gosh, Paulie has a robot and it's talking seductive to him. What does he do to that thing? And the movie has a hard time balancing its tones. With the death of Apollo Creed, all over the place, because you got Apollo freaking dying in the ring in front of his wife and in front of Rocky, and Rocky's like, oh my gosh, get a doctor, he's freaking dying, and everyone's taking pictures of him, which I think it's annoying, because it's oh my gosh, just move, but it's handled very well. You feel Rocky's anxiety. And then right before that, we have the 5-minute America dance and song, and then Apollo's I want you, and it's oh my gosh, Apollo, you're so quirky, and then Apollo just gets murdered. And then right after that, we have his funeral, and then right after that, Rocky's driving, and oh my gosh, the same shot of Stallone rubbing his forehead and looking down, and there's a whole 4-minute song right after that, and he's oh my gosh, he just can't stop thinking about it. It's just handled so poorly. It just, to me, it just does not balance everything as well as people make it out to be, as well as I think the filmmakers wanted it to be. And I've said that a lot, but to me, it just falls flat with execution. There's a lot to like here. Stallone gives a great performance as Rocky. Apollo Creed is likable. He's light on his feet. He's funny. And there's some story problems. Going from seeing Apollo just suddenly out of nowhere want to try and like box this guy in the ring, and he's like, it's just an exhibition. I gotta be in the ring. I'm just a warrior. I can't. If the warrior doesn't have a fight, he might as well be dead. And then all of a sudden, he's in the ring, and he's like, you know what? F it. I don't care about my wife. I don't care about my kids. We dying out here. Like, it's just like, dude, come on. And there's just a lot of logic gaps for me when it comes to this movie. And of course, there's a lot of goofy stuff in it. Like I said before, Polly's robot and Drago just being dead quiet. And I watched the theatrical cut. I don't know if the director's cut made a difference. All of the changes, I'll say this, all of the changes that it sounds like Stallone made to the director's cut, cutting out a lot of the cheese, adding more to Ivan, I would have loved. Like, it sounds like this movie probably would have shot up like 2 spots. But I didn't, I don't have access to that. I don't have the Blu-ray. Couldn't find it anywhere, and I was on a time crunch, so I didn't check it out. But Rocky 4, I love the score, the Rocky score, of course, and the Hearts on Fire montage is awesome. But I think the other, 4 montages in the movie just fall flat for me. Once Rocky has that Hearts on Fire montage, once that starts, the movie gets considerably much better. And the final fight is great. I love that part of it. But then Rocky's speech is just weird. And there's a lot of stuff in this movie that kind of just let me down. I've had it hyped up for so long. It's one of my dad's favorite movies, my brother's favorite movies. My brother had a poster of Rocky 4, the main poster on his wall for years. And for some reason, I've just never checked it out. I think I would have really loved this movie if I checked it out 5 years ago. And normally I'm an advocate for 80s cheese. I love the cheesy 80s movies. But for some reason, I think this movie just tried to do too much and too little. And it just did it too wildly, I think. And maybe this could change. I'm hoping it'll change. I'm hoping it's a movie that I really enjoy. Right now, it's a movie that, although I just really ragged on it for so long, people have been preaching the positives of this movie for years. So I don't know, I just kind of had to get my feelings out there. It's by no means a bad movie. I probably just rank it a lot lower than most people. Coming in at number 6, we have the new kid on the block, Creed 3. This one, Michael B. Jordan stepped up, took a seat in the director's chair, and brought in Jonathan Majors to play the antagonist, introduced a lot of interesting elements to the Rocky franchise, and also doesn't even feature Rocky. This movie, wow, how do I even talk about this? This movie, to me, one of the most disappointing movies I've seen. It's by no means a bad movie. It's an incredible sports movie. It's, even a good Creed movie, maybe. I just think it's easily the weakest of the Creed trilogy. One of the weaker Rocky movies, because, A, it doesn't feature Rocky, and I can see why they wouldn't feature Rocky. Sometimes it feels like there's maybe not a place for him. Sometimes it even feels like, hey, maybe Adonis could call Unc, freaking Uncle Rocky, who he's been close with for years now. Rocky, have you seen this crap, this guy? Or Rocky, I'm the champion again, Rocky, how you doing? Are you still kicking out there, or are you freaking dead? It just feels weird to me, and I didn't like a lot of the elements that Michael B. Jordan brought, especially in that final fight. The moment, of course, everyone knows about. If you've seen the movie, there's a moment in there that just takes me completely out of the movie, especially once the movie goes past the halfway mark. A lot of the plot conveniences just ramp up to 11, oh, Jonathan Majors did this, and that probably would have landed him jail time, but it's a movie. Creed's angry. He's a promoter. Creed's going to get back in the ring. Let's do it. Oh, Jonathan Majors did this. Creed, for some reason, is pissed out of his mind when he should be hyped because, A, it's his friend, B, world champ. It's just dude, there's just so much in this movie that for some reason I watched it and I was like, what? I don't get it. I don't get that. Why would that happen? How could this happen? It just kind of took me out of the movie, especially once the movie passes about the halfway mark. A lot of the plot threads regarding Creed's family are dropped. There's one big scene, and then after that it's just completely dropped. And, Jonathan Majors is calling Creed a coward on TV with Stephen A. Smith. I was dying for all the wrong reasons. No way it's Stephen A. Smith. Dude, how is Stephen A. in this movie? But I'm not complaining. I love Stephen A. Smith, bro. That dude's the funniest guy alive. But it just came off weird. It just did not feel to me like a Creed movie. It didn't feel like it belonged in the Rocky franchise. And a lot of that is just probably shedding the old skin of the Creed and Rocky movies and moving on. This is where we're going with this franchise. It's Adonis and the Creed, dynasty. They even say Creed dynasty, which I was king. But I was it's not a bad movie. I just found myself as a new Rocky fan and a longtime fan of the Creed franchise pretty disappointed. I don't think it reaches the highs of Creed 1 or 2, and it definitely has a lot of the low points of the Creed movies. You know, of course, the performances are off the board. Incredible job, especially by Jonathan Majors. He knocks it out of the park. I just think that this movie was maybe overhyped for me from the early buzz. People were like, it's the best in the franchise. And I was like, how is it going to be better than Creed and Creed 2? It wasn't. The general consensus is that a lot of people like it. I'm glad. I'm happy that people are loving it. I'm happy people are supporting it. Michael B. Jordan took a big, step to the director's chair. He's very passionate about the franchise. For me, a lot of the drama with Stallone and the producers rubbed me the wrong way, and it didn't affect my viewing experience, but I can definitely see why he didn't give this movie his blessing. I don't think it's by any means necessarily a bad movie. I just, I was disappointed. I can't get past that disappointment. I can't get past, the opening fight scene is awesome. The midway fight scene is just as cool. And the final fight is absolute dog water. I hated every second of it. It just takes a big creative risk that I despised, in all honesty. Props to you, Michael B. Jordan, and the writing team for taking that big risk, but I hated it. I'm sorry. I know they're not going to watch this video probably ever in their entire lifetime, even though I exist, but yeah, it just bummed me out. It's entertaining, but I just can't get over that disappointing feeling as I left the theater. I don't know why. I'm having a hard time kind of articulating it apart from plot and everything, but yeah. Going into number 5 is Rocky 3, and I've seen a lot of people say Rocky 3 doesn't handle the 80s tone as well as the Rocky 4 does. Rocky 3 is just way too cheesy. I'm the opposite. Rocky 4 is way too cheesy for me. Rocky 3 handles it way better. Mickey's death is better. The fights are toned down. The cheese is toned down. Yes, it's still goofy, but it hasn't got a freaking robot that's just trying to seduce Paulie the whole movie. You just have Paulie being racist, which, classic Paulie behavior. Just kidding. I actually hate Paulie. I think he's a terrible character and a terrible person, and probably my biggest gripe with the entire franchise overall. But I loved Rocky and Creed's bromance in this movie. It was perfect. Having Mickey die, he's a big character of the first 3 movies, and he's a big character continuing on in the franchise when it comes to like Rocky and how he feels about him. But I loved that, you have Mickey pass away after the fight with Mr. T, and Rocky's, back to square one, essentially. He's got no manager, got no trainer. He's just kind of lost because he lost the boxing match. And then Apollo comes in and is like, hey, man, I want you, but you got to owe me a favor. And I just loved everything with Rocky and Apollo. Everything with Rocky and Apollo was just so much fun. And the scene with Rocky and Adrian on the beach was like picture perfect. Like, that's probably one of the greatest Rocky Adrian scenes ever. It was like, wow. Stallone really knows these characters. Stallone knows what he's doing. Mr. T as Clubber Lang is super fun. I pity the fool, and beats the crap out of Rocky. And I like how the final fight wasn't what the first 2 had done. It differentiated itself, and that was refreshing. Some people would be like, oh, it's so annoying that Rocky, and Clubber Lang solve it in 3 or 4 rounds. But for me, it was like, you know what? That's awesome. I love that it's not redoing the same thing, because the previous 2 films had gone to round 15 and had, either Rocky or Creed one. And they switched it up a little bit. And, although the plot is predictable, every Rocky movie can be predictable pretty much, I still think this is a great sports movie. Rocky is battling with that fear that he hasn't felt in such a long time of losing again and not being enough. And I loved that. I thought it was very well done. Apollo Creed is awesome in this movie. I love Carl Weathers in this movie. He does such a great job. Sylvester Stallone, again, a great job. Mr. T, not my favorite villain in the franchise, but he's really entertaining. I had a great time. And then that Hulk Hogan fight is just so fun, because it's just he's assaulting everybody in the crowd, beating up security, and after the fight they're like, hey, good job, let's take a picture. It's dude, homie just committed felonies, but yeah, let's get a picture. It's just fun, it's such a fun time. And for me, it's such a great job of displaying Rocky and Apollo's friendship. And then Creed, and then, wow, I keep saying Creed 4. And then Rocky 4 is just you know what? Kill that guy. And they did. And coming in at number 4 is Creed 2. I love when movies can retroactively make, when sequels retroactively make the previous movies better. Like with this, Rocky 4 was probably, on par with Rocky 2. And then I saw Creed 2 again. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I rewatched it again, and I was like, wow, that movie's freaking incredible, dude. It's so good. I think this movie gets way too much hate. Everything in the third act is incredible. Like, you know what? Everyone's like, oh, the writing and directing is a step down, but the Dragos, how do you make the Dragos like the most cartoonish villain in the entire franchise? Literally a joke, apart from, he dies, he dies. I'm like, I'm not going to take this guy seriously. Rewatched Creed 2, and it's like, he lost everything because he lost the boxing match. Like, his country exiled him. No one wants anything to do with him. He just has his son, and he doesn't want that fate for his son. It's like, wow, that's actually like touching. Like, what the heck, man? And then at the end, when he throws in the towel to save his son's life, probably, and then you see his country abandon him again, and everyone abandons him. He loses everything, but he doesn't lose his son. I was like, wow, you know what? Freak, Stallone, you know exactly what you're doing, and you know what? This movie gets hate, but I freaking love that. That was incredible. Like, freaking bring me to tears, man. I teared up. I gotta admit, I teared up. And I started bawling at the end when Rocky goes and sees Robert and his grandson. It's just like, it's such a perfect ending to the Rocky and the Creed franchise. Honestly, they should have stopped there. It has such an incredible way of like bookending, and it's just like, it's so touching after watching all the movies. And you see Rocky finally come to terms with like his son being different. He moved away, and Rocky has nothing. And then, you know, he says goodbye to Adonis. He closes the curtain on the boxing part of his life, and very touching. Stallone gives an incredible performance here. Same with Michael B. Jordan and Tessa Thompson as they kind of navigate marriage and having a kid. I love that part. I think the fight scenes in this are really, really good. The final fight is one of the best fights. My favorite final fights, Creed 2, and Rocky 2. I think Creed 2 just has a great final fight. Victor Drago is very intimidating, freaking terrifying, and he's honestly like the protagonist of this movie. Like, you know, Creed is kind of a jerk to Rocky in the hospital because Rocky like abandoned him. But I think, you know, everything with the revisiting history of Rocky 4 is perfect. You know, the direction and writing, are a little bit of a step down. But the writing, when it comes to like all the Rocky 4 elements, just knocks it out of the park. It makes everything in Rocky 4 like miles better than it has any right to be. And then one last thing about Creed 2 is when he's just like punching the canvas and gets up and just starts wrecking Victor Drago, I was like getting the chills, dude. Like in the theater, I was like 16, 17. I was like, oh my gosh, this movie is freaking incredible. And 4 or 5 years later, that has not changed one bit. Going into our top 3, number 3 is going to be Creed. I think that this is a perfect demonstration of how to revitalize a franchise, focus on the old characters, give them a lot to do, but also breathe life into a new character and a new face going forward in the franchise. Everything with Adonis is incredible, you know, seeing him kind of become his legacy. This and Creed 2 just do such a great job of embracing fatherhood and legacy, and, you know, how do you work on forgiving your father when he was such a complicated person. And I think it's such a great way to have Adonis be a product of infidelity, you know, a byproduct of his father being unfaithful to Mama Creed. And I love the way that Adonis goes about that, and I love how, you know, Mrs. Creed has a way of bringing Adonis in and showing that, you know, she can forgive Apollo for what he's done because he had Adonis who's such like a great kid, and he gives her like new life and a new purpose, and she's just so charitable to him and definitely changes his life. And then you see Adonis like grow up, and he has this like need to box. Like, he is a completely different character from Rocky, but they both have a need to prove to themselves and to the world different things. And I think it does such a great job. It's such a great mirror to the first Rocky of Adonis, you know, proving to himself that he can do this, proving to the world that he can own up to being Apollo Creed's son, that he has a point for being a Creed. And also focusing on his name, you know, Johnson as well, balancing those two names. It was very meaningful to me. You know, I'm someone who has been born in the same family. You know, I'm not adopted or anything. I don't have any half siblings, but to me it was just really touching to see someone embrace both sides of their family and to kind of embrace their heritage and their legacy, all the good and the bad. You know, Adonis doesn't make excuses for his dad. The whole, you know, Creed franchise, at least the first two, is focused on, okay, Apollo was a very complicated person. He has good and bad. You know, how do we love, respect, and forgive him for all that? And I thought that was very well done, very touching. Of course, Sylvester Stallone just does an incredible job here with acting Rocky. He does a great job acting as Rocky. He gives probably my second favorite Rocky performance here, just with everything with Adrian and how he learns he has cancer. Says he doesn't want to go through with it. I teared up. You know, the top 4 movies, I cried during all of these, and I was like, what the heck? Like, am I a big baby? These movies are just insanely well written, insanely well acted, directed, four of the best sports movies ever made. Four of, in my opinion, my argument, four of the best movies ever made when it comes to like the themes that they're focusing on and just like inspiration. Like, dude, if you ever want to like become a boxer, I don't really want to get the crap beaten out of me like all the time. But I was watching these movies, I was like, dang, maybe I should be a boxer. Like, dude, it's crazy. But I think Creed also has one of the best final fights in the franchise, like I mentioned before. And when he like stands up after his knockout and the Rocky theme starts playing and he just goes to town, I was like, oh, movies. I love movies. It's just so awesome. I freaking love this movie. Creed just has such a great heart at its core. There's a few things that bug me, like the, Philly and motorcycles, four-wheelers is so weird, or how Adonis is like, you sick old man, get out of here. I'm like, dude, why are you being so mean to Rocky? Like, homie is the greatest guy to ever live. Like, stop. And it's just a few things here and there, a few nitpicks, but overall I think it's such a strong revitalization to the franchise, such a great addition. Ryan Coogler just brings his A game. So does Michael B. Jordan and Sly. They all do such a great job. Number 2 on my list is going to be Rocky Balboa. This was a complete first-time watch for me. The only thing I had seen, heard, or known about this movie was the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows speech. Wow, I freaking loved this movie. This movie was insane. This is like easily one of my favorite movies of all time now. Like, I watched it, I was like, wow, this is so touching. And it sounds corny, like, coming from me, I'm like this guy that reads comics all the time, and I was like, you know what, Marvel movies are good. And I watched Rocky Balboa, and I'm like crying in my basement at 2 a.m. I'm like, dude, this movie, perfect. It's so good. It's not perfect. It's definitely not as rewatchable as I would want it to be. There's definitely, I have such a hard time talking about this because, like, I can't articulate what's bad about it. I just think maybe it's a little slow paced, and maybe the, enemy boxer, I totally forgot his name. I've been talking about Rocky for so long, I just can't remember. But I think, the opposing boxer, the world champ, is a little weak when it comes to his performance, his character. But I think everything with Stallone is just incredible. Stallone acts his heart out here. It's just so inspirational when he sees those steps again and climbs them. And seeing him in life after Adrian is just heart-wrenching, And she passed away from ovarian cancer. It's like, dude, Rocky, what have you done to me, man? Like, Stallone knew what he had, and he knew he had greatness, and he did it one more time. And seeing Rocky go the distance one more time to prove to himself, to get that anger out and everything, and to kind of show that he could do it again. He had that final fight in him. He just needed one more time, one more chance to prove himself. That was really meaningful to me. And then his relationship with his son Robert, especially that scene where he gives him that incredible speech. I was crying again. I cried like 4 times in this movie, man. I was just like, the waterworks were going. And it sounds cringe, it sounds corny, but dude, dang, man. What a freaking good movie. If you haven't seen Rocky Balboa, please watch it. It's like, now I'm like, dude, people aren't talking about this movie. Like, when you talk about Rocky, people are like, oh, Rocky 4, your Creed. Dude, what about Rocky Balboa? This movie's awesome. Like, this movie's incredible. Please go watch it. It's so good. But, of course, coming in at number 1, we got Rocky, the original, the OG from '76, the movie that Stallone wrote himself, sold the script for $1, gave away his dog so he could survive. He was homeless. Every story you hear about this movie, everything you hear about this movie is true when it comes to how good it is. When it comes to, was it worth it for Sylvester Stallone to sacrifice all that? Was it worth it? I'm sure he'll say yes a million times over. This is the greatest sports movie ever made, in my opinion, or up there. And it's easily one of my favorite movies of all time now. This is probably one of the most inspirational movies I've ever seen. I'd seen it a few times, bits and pieces here and there, and I'm just like, what's this about, And you really sit down and focus on it and realize that the sports, of course, the boxing is a metaphor for Rocky just needing to go the distance. He's never been given a shot, anything for his life, anything for greatness, and he has all this potential inside him that he just needs to see, and that everyone else needs to see, and that he can, as someone from the streets of Philly, not me, Rocky, someone from the streets of Philly who's just doing like mob work and is just like a boxer trying to take these small fights, he can do things that no one expected him to do. And he just needed that shot from Apollo Creed. And it's so touching to see Apollo, realize that his opponent is someone who needs to be respected after, he clowns on him and everything. And then the ending is incredible, where he's not interested in the outcome of the fight because he's been saying the whole movie he just wants to go the distance. And after that, a conversation with Adrian, Did I say Adrian or Polly? Wow, that conversation with Adrian in the bed where he's talking about how he just wants to go the distance, how he needs to go the distance with Apollo, and then seeing that and seeing Adrian come out and they confess their love for each other. I cried, of course, and then the Rocky theme plays. Just so inspirational. This movie is incredible. One of my favorite movies of all time, like I've said before. Rocky Balboa, one of the greatest fictional characters of all time. And people are going to take issue with, there's a lot of things in this movie that don't age well, particularly with Rocky and Adrian's relationship. But seeing where it goes in the future and seeing, how Adrian just needed to come out of her shell, it's like, okay, you know what? Rocky knew best. Rocky knows her. And, maybe it didn't age as well as it could have, but who cares, dude? If you're going to cry about it on Twitter, cry about it on Twitter. Don't care. But this movie is just incredible. Everyone is on their A game here. My only gripe with this movie is a gripe I have with the entire franchise is I can't stand Paulie. And I'm sure he's meant to be that way. He's definitely written to be unlikable in the first couple Rocky movies, and in Rocky 5, he's at his best, but then he just signs away the franchise and he takes care of Robert. Just so weird. But he is just such an interesting character when it comes to that, and his point of his character, from what I can gather, is just showing how good of a person Rocky can be. Paulie is Rocky's foil. They're best friends, even though Paulie is just an absolute ass to everybody, to Adrian included. Everyone he meets, Paulie just sucks. I cannot stand Paulie. And then there's Rocky, who's just such a good, kind-hearted person, good-natured dude. And you know what? I can overlook that, no problem, and just see how good of a person Rocky is, and just enjoy everything in this movie. It's just so inspirational. It's so down to earth. It's just so earnest that you just have to enjoy yourself while you watch it. I watch it and I just die at all of the Rocky lines where he's like, "Moo," or when he's jogging on the ice, he's like, my brain don't work so good, or I don't know what he says. It's just you know what, dude, you're such a goofy guy. I freaking love him. Give that man some alcohol, sit back, and I just sit there sipping on some Coke, listening to that guy talk. I would do that for hours. But all in all, I love this movie. I love this franchise. It's given us some of the, in my opinion, greatest sports movies and greatest movies of all time. And it's incredible, almost 50-year run. And I would recommend every single movie on this list except maybe Rocky 5. Even Rocky 5 if you just want to have a good time. All in all, guys, what's your favorite Rocky movie? What's your ranking of the franchise? Have you seen Creed 3? Go ahead, let me know down below in the comments section. If you have any other suggestions for movies I should watch, rankings I should do, videos I should make, feel free to let me know. Stay tuned for the Scream franchise review coming this week. I'm going to try and go through all the Scream movies, and then I see 6 on Thursday, so I'm very excited about that. But as always, I'm Carter. Have a great rest of your day.